Hi, in this video we will be solving problem number 5. The question is write an algorithm such that if an element in an array of m by n matrix is 0, its entire row and column is set to 0. So this is our solution. So I just solved the whole problem, but then the problem was like it took me almost like 23 minutes to explain. So I don't want the video to be that long, so I just wanted to make it a short, so I'm recording it again with a quick solution. So coming to the problem, I just took two matrix here. So one is 1 1 1 0. So this is like my input array, and output should be look like something similar to this one. So here we have a 0 element in the last position of the first row. So all the elements in this row should be set to 0, and all the elements in this column, in this row, in this column should be set to 0. So here also we have another 0. So this entire row should set to 0, and this entire column should set to zeros as well. And we also have another 0 here. So last row set to zeros, and column will be set to zeros again. So I found out that there are so many zeros in this, so I just took another matrix as an example: 1 2 3 4 0 5 6 7 8. So since we have 0 here, we will set all the elements in this row should set to 0, and this column will set to zeros. So as soon as I see this problem, what I could possibly think of is like just represent this, just have a variable that represents the whole column, and then whole row, and then another variable that represents whole column, and loop through all the elements and try to see if there are any zeros in any element. So if we have a 0, just change that 0 to some arbitrary number. So once we have that arbitrary number, once we change all the zeros to some arbitrary number, after we loop through the elements again, and then we just change that arbitrary number to 0. But the problem here is for looping through and then looping through all the elements in the matrix and changing the 0 to some arbitrary number, it's going to take a big of m cross n time, and then we have to loop through again to change that arbitrary number to 0. So all the elements in that row and column should set to 0. So that's going to take a big of n plus nth time. But this problem can be solved by big of m plus 1. But this logic I got it from internet, because I never done any matrix solutions. So this solution came from one of the sources in the internet. So so in that problem, what I'm gonna do is I'll again it's the idea is like just simply traversing through each element in the matrix, and also we will take first row and first column, or last row or last column, and if we see any cell in a row or a column has a value 0 or not. If it is 0, so before doing it, I think we should take two variables that will hold row flag and column flag. By default it will set to false, but if we, while traversing, if any of the element is 0, then we just make that flag to true, and then after that we change all the elements in that specific row and column will change to 0. So I'll be writing a code for that solution. So I'll just write my function name, something like, we are doing conversion, so I'll take convert, and this one should take matrix as an input, and we need two variables that will hold row and column. So matrix is like a bit weird, so to get the column we're gonna do length of matrix 0th elements in all the arrays, and column row is like we just get the length of the matrix. Since it is m cross n matrix, I will take just m equal to length of matrix and n equal to length of matrix of 0. So this one will be holding information about the columns, and one will information about the rows. So this one is row, this one is a column. So what I'm gonna do is I'll just scan first to see if there are scan rows first, and then I will see if there are any zeros. So for that I will use a for loop for I in a range of m. So what I'm looking is, since we're doing in row, so row should be constant, 0th row, and the element should be changed for every iteration. So in the beginning we do 0th element, and then first element, second element, that's how it will be. So that's how I'm keeping this as a 0, and then I'm doing I here, and then I'm comparing it with 0. Sorry, it's an integer 0. So this is my logic for row 2. So this is how I scan for the first row, and I will see if this is true, then I will, okay, so I will take row flag and column flag. So these two by defaultly set to false, but if this is the case, I will set row flag equal to true. So if this is the case, if we see any 0 in that row, we don't have to look for any of the elements, because we know that since it's already found a 0, we have to change whole column anyway and whole row. So we're gonna break this loop, and we do the same thing for columns as well. For okay, I'll just take it as a j, for j in range of n. Now only change is like we keep j here and we take 0 here, and then we do the same logic. Now we set column matrix, column flag equal to true, and then we break it if we see any element is set to 0 in that specific column. We find it. If we find it, we just break it. Now we have to process the rest of the matrix to use first row and first column to mark if any cell in that row or column has value 0 or not. So for now we just did for only first row and first column. Now we're gonna do for rest of the matrix as well. So for that we should use 2 for loops. So one for loop will start from m, and inner for loop will do all the elements for n. Again, it's a for loop for I in a range. We already did for first element, so we have to do from the first element. So 1 to m, and then we loop through the second element again for j in range 1 to n. So this inner loop will loop through all the elements inside the columns. So now we're gonna have our formula. So matrix of 0 or j is equal to 0 or matrix of I j or 0 equal to 0. So if this is true, then we make the whole column or whole row will set to 0. matrix of I and j equal to 0. So now what we're going to do is we check for if we check for that these two flags. If the row flag is true, then we'll just assign zeros to all the cells on the first row. So we just take I equal to 0. So here we are setting it, right? So if that is the case, if row flag is true, then we just assign zeros to all the cells of the first row. So I'll just use a while loop here. So while loop is like simple logic is while row flag and I should be less than n. Sorry, so m is the row flag for us. We just assign all the values to 0 in this case. So while matrix of I 0 I, we set to 0, we just increment the I value. Now we're gonna do the same thing for column flag as well. Again, we can take the same variables, it doesn't really matter. While column flag and I less than m, we do matrix of I 0 equal to 0. Again, we increment the ith value. So after these two for loops, the column, the output of the output should be looking something looks like this one. So what we are doing is we are taking two variables. One will hold a column row information and one will hold a column information, and we are taking two flags. So by defaultly it will set to false. So in this method we are taking reference as the first row and first column. So we are just looping through them. So if the first row is set to 0, we make that a row flag equal to we make that row flag is going to be true. So if row flag is going to true, we just set all the elements in that row will be set to 0 in this loop, and then we look for the column, the same thing. And if any of the element in that column is set to 0, then we make column flag equal to true, and then we change those columns to 0. Since we just did for only first row and first column, so here we do for same thing for rest of the matrix. And once we find these things, we just change those whatever the values that we found, whatever the zeros that we find, we just change them here. So this is gonna be the problem that I could possibly think of. It's already 30 minutes, and like I said, here we have to loop through each element, so it's gonna taking m cross n time. We are not using any extra space there other than the constant variable, so it shouldn't take a more space though. So it's just like a constant space. So this would be my solution for this problem. Thank you.